Have you ever been in a room and all of a sudden you hear this? Well, you don't quite hear it, but you know it's the presence of someone that is sucking all the joy out of the room. Today, we're going to explore how do we deal with negative employees. Stay tuned. The US Bureau of Statistics recently came out with a finding that negative employees cost US business $3 billion. Not quite sure how they came at that figure, but whatever it is, it's a big figure. So today, I want to talk about how do we deal with negative employees and negative people because, unfortunately, they are around. The first way of dealing with a negative employee actually has nothing to do with them and everything to do with us. It's look inwards. Now, that might be confusing. You say, well, it's them. What's it got to do with me? And it's interesting. You see, we relate differently to different people. And as people, we carry our own biases and judgments. And so therefore, step number one always is self-awareness. It's always looking at ourselves. Why is it I am reacting to this person in this way? Why is it this person is triggering me in this way? Why is it this negativity I'm perceiving is impacting me? I think that's a really helpful and fruitful search because at times there are ways that we can come to manage a situation that whereas before this person was annoying us, and then we're able to come to a different way of managing it and really let that annoyance slip away. So look inside. Look at what is happening. Look at the triggers that are being pressed by this person and ask some great questions about yourself and ask fundamentally, how am I reacting? And am I reacting in a way that is really not helping this situation? Point number two is the question, what is the evidence? It's kind of following from point number one. You know, as human beings, we make lots of assessments. And there's a difference between an assessment and an assertion. And an assertion is something that is grounded in objective fact. An assessment is something that we are assessing. So the difference between both of those is, you know, Mary made a negative comment. You know, Mary's a negative person. See the difference there? An objective point about something that happened and then making an assessment about a character. So when it comes to negative people, it's really important for us to assess what's happening in the situation. Are there patterns? Because if we uncover the way a person behaves, we may see interesting behaviors. Maybe they're negative around a certain situation, or maybe they're negative just around certain people. I remember I was coaching a person a few months ago. He was really having a tough time with a colleague who they just said, oh, they're such a negative Nelly. And I asked them just to be curious about how they were showing up and what they perceived their negativity was all about. And after a month when we met again, what was really interesting was some of the insights they had. They said, you know, what I've begun to notice is, yes, at times they are negative, but it comes at moments of change in their lives, especially moments where they have no control, or at least they perceive they have no control. And that gave him a different viewpoint in which to look at some of what he was labeling negativity. Really what he saw was that someone that was uncomfortable about change and that they were reacting negatively to that change because they felt disempowered. And it gave him different ways to respond to that person and to look at the relationship in a different way. Number three is don't avoid them and don't let them suck all that air out. That's right. You see, at the core of emotional intelligence is this phenomenon called emotional contagion. That is, we catch the emotions of other people. And so, therefore, in any discussion or any group, there is a process through which we are catching the emotions of others. And so if the only voice that is heard, if the only mood that is felt in any gathering or meeting is negativity, then guess what? Then we are going to begin to catch some of that, and that is going to infiltrate the mood of everyone that is there. And so it's important, not that we're trying to shut down the negativity, not that we're trying not to listen to what they're saying, but rather making sure that it is not the only voice that is heard. To make sure that there are other formats of thinking and other opportunities. You know, sometimes it just takes the simple word of the leader to say, okay, we've heard enough now about what's not working. I want to spend now a few moments dedicating to what could be, what are the possibilities. It's really important that the leader has their hand on the pulse of what's happening in the room, and that along with that negative voice, we're also hearing some voices of positivity and some voices of potentiality. The fourth point is all about feedback. You know, sometimes we just make these assumptions that the person knows that they're negative, it's just the way, and at times we've never really said to them, I want to offer you some feedback on something you said or did. Now, that is tricky, because the feedback we want to give is not some judgment. It's not, you know what, you're just a negative Nelly, you're always negative. That's not helpful. But some observations, objective observations, can be really helpful when it comes to the behavior. So a way of feedback can be to a person who tends to be a little negative is, here is something I observed. I heard you say this. This is the impact that that had on the meeting. And here is how I would like you to perhaps modify your behavior in the future, or to become more aware of how your behavior impacts others. You know, sometimes people are just not aware. They're not aware of how what they say or show up impacts others. That's one of the critical things that I find out in emotional intelligence so often, is that people are very self-aware. They don't know how negative they are. They don't know how their mood impacts and feeds others. So feedback is a wonderful way of bringing to light how another person's behavior is impacting others. And number 5 is the reality that at times we have to let the person go. Sometimes a person is just not a right fit or energy for the organization or for the task at hand or what is required. Sometimes their mood is such that it is feeding everyone else. You know, I ran into this a few months ago talking to an office owner. They had a small little office of 6 people, and there was one person who was just constantly negative. They tried everything they possibly could do to no avail, and it was really sapping the energy out of everyone else. And so the hard decision in that situation is that at the end of the day, we need to let this person go. And that's what they did. And let me tell you, he told me that the appreciation shown by everyone else was just amazing that following day. That their ability to get back on track and to show up with more energy was just incredible. So sometimes the hard choice is that we have to get rid of the negativity because its influence just is too much and is seeping everywhere. No one enjoys having negativity around them, but you know what? There are practical things we can do to manage that negativity. If you've enjoyed this video, I invite you to visit the next video, which talks about 5 different ways of managing our emotional triggers.